Right, so of all the terrible and terrifying things this Labour government has frankly done since coming into power, perhaps nothing has quite stoked division and fear as much as the upcoming assisted dying bill being voted on today. Will probably have been voted on by the time this video goes out, in fact. The debate had just begun at time of writing, though, and I'll admit to being conflicted on this myself. The idea that terminally ill people should be able to choose to end their own lives rather than suffer through the awful ravages of an incurable condition, it seems a reasonable concept. The safeguards should also be rigorous, and it should be the decision of the individual affected and nobody else. That isn't what we're getting, though. What we're getting is a seemingly rushed through policy where safeguards are highly questionable, and the comments of the Labour MP who has driven this policy to the point we're at now has herself just said something so inexplicably horrifying it brings into question the real motivations behind this bill, that it isn't actually to help those living through a death sentence condition and suffering with it, but to help people shuffle off this mortal coil for other, far more harrowing reasons that really should mark a pause until this bill is tightened up and frankly far more ethical than it appears to be right now. Right, so the assisted dying bill is getting voted on today. Hasn't quite happened yet at time of recording, but nobody, frankly, can predict how this is going to go. A lot of MPs from all sides of the House are unhappy with it. The lack of safeguarding raising concerns amongst disability organisations, notably DPAC, Disabled People Against Cuts, but many others as well. People genuinely fearing that there is not adequate protections in place against mistakes being made, which of course are not exactly correctable, are they, if your life has been ended? I thought of it this way, perhaps unfairly actually, but we did away with the death penalty because justice is not perfect and mistakes got made. And fundamentally, that is the case we're looking at here too, except mistakes can be made in all manner of different ways here, from incorrect terminal diagnoses to do not resuscitate orders being falsely placed on patients' notes. On top of that, there have been fears of coercion being used as well. The fear that family members getting a say in ending someone's life could be done for economic and financial reasons rather than medical ones. And that those who will be most affected by that will be from the lowest economic backgrounds, therefore seemingly coming from the perspective of the wealthy, doing away with ordinary working class people of no more value to them anymore. I've been wrestling with this issue, though, this idea of assisted death. I lost my father to terminal cancer in 2009. All treatments were tried. His body just simply didn't respond to them. Macmillan nurses were brilliant. He passed away peacefully at home. But it was 6 months of watching that disease ravage him and leaving him a shell of his former self. And you can't help but think, in that position, if only he could have been spared the worst of that. My mother, as regular viewers will know, I lost very recently at the end of September. She had been diagnosed with motor neuron disease some 18 months previously, an incurable disease, and I'm sure many of you are aware, that leaves you effectively trapped within your own body as it packs up around you, essentially. And again, once that diagnosis was nailed on, only one outcome was possible. And seeing her ability to eat, drink and communicate all pack up before that final release, you can't help but think there's got to be a better way than this to end people's suffering. As their eldest child, and knowing that much of their ongoing care, especially in Mum's case, was deferred to me, I can't imagine being put in the position of being asked if I wanted to end their lives, though. That should always have been their decision, and their decision alone, if they had had that option. And both were in sound enough mind, I think, to have done so, certainly well before the end. Mum certainly had opted for that DNR, knowing the outcome for her, but that was as much as she could have put in place. But the lack of safeguards in this bill means ultimately I could not support this now, even with my own family history. DNRs get abused in hospitals. There have been multiple instances of this, and until that is rectified, we're going too fast by trying to pass this bill. And a classic example of it was shared by Dr. Callum Miller on Twitter, who spoke about a case he'd had experience with. He said, "I once witnessed a do not resuscitate conversation as follows. Consultant informed by junior team that one patient needs a DNAR. Note that the reasons are rarely discussed in any detail at all. Doctor approaches bed on ward round, in bay view of other patients. Doctor, good morning. Patient, hello. Doctor, so sometimes in hospital things can go wrong, so if that happens and your heart stops, I think we'll just let you go quietly, okay? Patient, mortified face, okay. End conversation. His was the worst case, but there have been many cases I've seen that are not too dissimilar, and frankly any of us who have had elderly relatives in hospital or work there can relate. It is actually pretty rare for DNR decisions to be discussed with patients, even rarer for that discussion to happen before the form is signed. Question for the assisted suicide/euthanasia folks is, why are you so convinced that euthanasia conversations will go any better in a medical culture like this and in a resource-stressed NHS as this? If you think they will, you are 100% delusional. That is, quite frankly, horrifying. None of us want to hear that from a doctor in a hospital. That should not ever happen. But now we know that it does. And here we have a doctor telling us it does as well, as part of this NHS culture, stretched NHS as we have. And he's seen it. Why would you think it would go better for similar conversations regarding legalised euthanasia? Going back a stage, though, there is the matter of diagnosis, though. How many times have we read of people being given a terminal diagnosis, told they have X number of months to live, and yet end up living much longer? The Tory Fibs Twitter account asked this very question of their followers. If they knew someone who had lived for a long time after doctors told them they only had a short time to live, he had plenty of responses. Here's a few examples. Fantastic, I can't pronounce that any other way, frankly, wrote, yes, my dad, he had stomach cancer. They had to remove most of his stomach. They first said he would be lucky to survive the op. They then gave him a week, then a month. This went on, and a year or so later, he was given the all clear. In the end, he died of a heart attack 10 years later. Connor wrote, yep, my mum, diagnosed with stage 3B lung cancer in 2017, given a DS-1500 form, had a secondary tumour in her brain. This December, she is being discharged from the hospital, given the all clear from both. They called her a medical marvel, and I feel blessed to still have her here. And Dave MJ wrote, my wife, extreme pain, diagnosed stage 4 lung cancer, spread to spine, brain and hips, told February 2017, may see Christmas. Easter 2017, put on a new drug. By summer, her snooker ball-sized lung cancer had shrunk to marble size. Just celebrated 50th birthday and promotion with no signs of cancer. New treatments save lives, as examples here are shown. But if you can just have your life ended, where's the incentive to search for cures to currently uncurable health conditions going forwards then? None of this is being catered for in this bill. And then, of course, there is the issue that has undermined everything, which is the terrifying comment coming from the Labour MP behind this bill, right-winger Kim Ledbetter, and again underlines all the fears regarding safeguards that people have after Ledbetter implied that fears of being a burden could be a legitimate reason to seek death. That is a whole different argument, and one that has nothing to do with terminal illness at its root. That goes beyond. People who have mental illness will more likely feel like a burden on loved ones. Those of us who suffer depression may have felt that from time to time. But Ledbetter has argued that feeling like that legitimizes personal choice to die, rather than medical reasoning, saying she wouldn't want to be a burden. Societal coercion has entered her head. She's all, well, Keir Starmer agrees with this, and I'm thinking, yes, I bet he does. She's now possibly thinking, along with Rachel Reeves, how they can get that benefits bill down if a few more claimants can be made to feel like burdens, as if that's not happened enough over the last several years, and offer them a permanent way out, shall we put it. I mentioned DPAC earlier. They, amongst others, are protesting outside of Parliament today, encouraging people to vote no. The messaging from them is to assist them to live before you assist them to die. And really, this isn't something anyone should have to protest against, really. Surely that's logic and common sense and human nature. Somebody else potentially having a say in ending your life. It cannot be. And I cannot help but be reminded, rightly or wrongly, that Ledbetter herself is only an MP because her own sister had her life ended by someone else. Jo Cox. Yes, she was murdered. But if this goes through with all the lack of safeguards, then isn't this legalised murder in waiting potentially? Surely it would just be a matter of time before such an event ended up happening. I don't support this in its current form. I couldn't possibly. It's not secure enough. And Ledbetter's comments are terrifying. A government that would rather end your life, given that she said that Keir Starmer supports and agrees with her, than supports you to live as this bill stands. And its Labour MP backer has seemingly made explicit, and should it pass, we've plenty of reason to be fearful. Any of us could be struck down tomorrow with some sort of life-changing injury or illness. You'd hope you'd be supported in recovering from it, or being able to live with it. But that might not be true going forwards with legislation like this in place. This is a Labour government that doesn't seem to believe in supporting the people of this country, not even to live, but actually actively avoid it. Well, we're talking end of life here. The other day, another Labour MP got rinsed for choosing charity campaigning over asking the government for help to deal with the massive flooding in the wake of Storm Bert. Rinsing is probably the most appropriate adjective to use in that case. But get all the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.